Okay, so we're going to work with date time objects. I'm going to kind of spin up a quick Windows form app. I'm just going to call it DT for date time. And now let's set the startup project to date time and drag on a button. Work with date and time. We'll call this button dates. And this is just more of an exploring, like what are the different ways to work with date and times. And so we're just going to be, looking at this data type. And so just like when we look at strings and we see that we can split strings and all the different methods that we have available to a string, we have a date time object called DT. And you can kind of see, even as IntelliSense is suggesting, one way of building a date time object is just setting it equal to now. But as we've been building objects, there is a syntax that you're used to. You set it equal to a new date time, and then we can look at the constructor. Now, upon looking at this constructor, you could see one of 12. Okay, that means that there are 12 overloaded constructors for how you can build date time objects. And so if you just kind of scroll through this, you can see our first one takes a long data type, and you kind of scroll, like some of this might not make sense, like long ticks and kind. This one makes sense. Integer year, integer month, integer day. And so that's pretty straightforward. You pass it 3 integers for the year, month, and day. So today is 2023, so let's just start with 2023, comma. Now the month, and you can see it even suggests the month 1 through 12. So you always got to ask yourself, is it starting the count at 0 or is it starting the count at 1? In this case, it looks like January is 1 instead of starting the count of January at 0. So it is March. So let's go 3. And then the day is 13. So that's pretty straightforward. Of course, this is only accounting for, that only accounts for the date. That does not account for the time. So if we continue to scroll through the constructors, and again, just kind of exploring the different ways of building date times, we got one that takes a calendar object. Not so interested in that. Here, this is interesting. Now we have year, month, date, and then we have hour, minute, seconds. So those are 2 constructors that are fairly straightforward and easy to work with. The first one takes 3 integers for the day, month, and time. The next one takes 6 integers separated by commas that will include the hours, minutes, and seconds. So again, if I just kind of scroll through this is 2023. The month is March. Today's date is 13. Now the hour, you could see, again, just looking at the tooltip, it says hours 0 through 23. Of course, that is 0 based. We are looking at 8:26 in the morning right now, which would be hour 9 if we're starting our count at, hour 7, excuse me, I went the wrong way. Hour 7 being the 8th hour, right? If you're starting your count at 0, it starts at 0. Minutes 0 through 59, I'll just do 25, and who knows what the seconds are, so we'll just do 30. Okay, so this is another way of constructing date time objects. We've just learned 2 different fairly easy ways. And even, yeah, go ahead.
So when you spin this up, is it just always going to take what time you gave it, or does it in the background keep up from when you started the time?
This is just going to be the time you gave it. This is like a timestamp, right? Now you can change it.
Yeah.
You can change it, and we'll learn some ways to change it. But like right now, this is like a timestamp. This is this date time object is just going to stay put at this minute, time, and seconds. Okay. Now, just kind of interestingly enough, let's go ahead and pull up a label result. And kind of, now that we have this object, let's spit it out in a label result. And delete the text.
How come you don't put it in alphabetical order so you know where it is?
How come I don't put what in alphabetical order?
Your properties.
Yeah, preference. Yeah, that might be a good idea for me because I'm always hunting, and the question was how come I don't put my properties in alphabetical order so I can just go to T, and you do that by selecting this option right here, and then it'll just be alphabetical. Let's try it. I mean, I've done that in the past, and I switch back, and it's kind of the default to do by category. So yeah, good question. Now in our label result, .text equals DateTime toString. Remember, toString is a method that a lot of objects just by convention, you write a toString method. And let's just kind of see how that formats that. And again, we hard coded that. And that's kind of what you would expect, right? And so, of course, the toString is just going to print out all the information, and it's nicely formatted. I mean, it looks like, you think about what that did is it inserted these slashes, it inserted the colons, it put AM, PM there for us. And so the toString obviously did some formatting for us, which is nice. But there are some other methods and properties. Now, again, as I scroll through this object, the methods kind of have this box, right? So toString is a method, but if I just want to pull out the property, this is a year property. Well, of course, the year property returns an integer, so you have to match the type, right? So we have a string on the left, we have an int on the right. Of course, you need a string on both sides. So one way of formatting this, if I just wanted to extract the year, I could put in one of these little string interpolation things, and I could say the year is dt.year, and now I've got a string on the left and a string on the right, and that's just a way to extract just the year. So we have methods and we have properties of this object. Hey, now we understand a little bit more. Now that we've done some classes, we've made our own classes, we understand a little bit more what a method of a class is and what a property is. So let's just keep looking. Of course, gets the number of ticks that represent the date and time of this instance. We didn't mess with any ticks, so I'm not going to mess with that. Of course, if you just want to extract the date, this is date and time merged together. If I'm remembering correctly, there is no just date object separate from a time object. There's one object that does both. Okay, but there is no date equals, date.today or anything like that. That does not exist in C#. It's just one object that stores them both together. And that's
looks like there was
that, not all languages handle it that way, but that's how it's handled in C#. So of course, let's pull in the date and now you kind of would expect the date to kind of chop off the time, and well, in fact, it did. It has a default value of 12 a.m., right? Maybe not what you would expect. That's certainly not, if you don't work with this every day, you kind of forget how it works. But again, that's not, obviously the time is still hard-coded at 7:25 and 30 seconds, But if you just extract the date, it kind of just has some sort of default for the time. Yeah.
Was there one that said date only?
Yeah, so let's look at that. So what else is there?
When you were typing up the object.
Oh, there is a date only. Represents dates with values. Let's look at this one. There you go. There is a date only.
So do you want us to use date and time or date only?
Date only. Yeah, if you can get the lab that we have.
Just ask for
Now here's something worth exploring. So here's something that you'll need to do in the lab. Let's keep kind of going forward with this, because yeah, there is a date only. I do not remember that. Obviously, I said that there was not a date only, and there it is, a date only. So I just simply don't remember that. But let's keep going with date time, and then we'll kind of come back to date only. What's nice about this, and we'll call this date time today. There is kind of a shorthand syntax, date time dot now, and so you could kind of see how we constructed this object. And this is so that you don't have to hard code the hours, seconds, minutes, date, etc., etc. This is kind of a shorthand property for getting that exact time in those exact seconds. Of course, every time I run that, the seconds are changing because, well, we're creating a new object on every button click. Let's create another one, date time yesterday equals new date time, and let's just put in 2023, comma 12. No, the month is 3. The day was 12. And let's just say hour would be 7:35 and 30. What's nice about these date time objects is that you can use them in comparison operators. You can compare them. You could say if one date was before or after the other date, right? And this is just going to be pretty obvious when you do something like if yesterday is less than today. So it's not intuitive necessarily to think that you can compare these, to say is 10 less than 15, it's obvious. You got two integers. Okay, but it's not obvious, at least to me, to say, hey, you got these date and time objects and you can compare them against one another. And so this will be very useful to you when you start saying, hey, I have a start date for a conference, and you want to see if the start date was before or after or within a range of dates, right? In other words, if you want to see all the conferences that existed in 2022, you can use those in some comparison operators to see just something kind of straightforward like that, and you could see that comparison works. And so, the first thing that I wanted to demonstrate is just kind of tinkering around with this class, looking at the different methods, looking at the different properties, okay, looking at how you can construct one, and then showing that DateTime.now, right, is kind of a very common way of constructing a date, right? And so you think about that example that I used of like a user buys something online. Well, a very easy way to construct a date and time around that is just using dateandtime.now. It's going to get you the minutes, the seconds, the date, and the like. So that's the first thing I wanted to just tinker with. The second thing worth showing is that if you want to search for dates, like you want to see if something falls within a range, you can see if one date is less than, aka happened before, another date. Of course, you could do less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. All the normal comparison operators work with date and time objects. Okay, so we looked at the data type. We looked at the now property. We looked at the toString method. Let's look at one more thing. So you might want to prompt the user for a string, like let's put a text box. And a label. So I'm going to say enter date in format month, day, year. Right? Now you're going to have to validate this, right, to make sure that they give you the data in that format. At some point, we haven't really talked a whole lot about how to do that, so it's not a requirement of any lab of any sort, but I just want to show you, you can prompt the user for a date. And, you know, if this were HTML, of course, you could have a date calendar pop down. And, of course, under the toolbox, there is a date time picker, right? So maybe we can use this instead.
Can we use that on the lab?
You can use this on the lab. You can use a date time picker. So let's... we'll just select a date. Okay, and this is a date time picker. And so my name will be DT main picker. How about that? DT main picker. And let's see if we could put that into a string, or we need to put that into a date and time object. So let's say string user date equals DT main picker dot. And let's look at how we might read this. Of course, I was just going to read a string and then convert it. But now that we're going down this rabbit hole, gets or sets the format of the date and then displayed in the controls. So gets or sets format dot so let's just take a look at this. Label result.text equals user date. Okay. That didn't get DT picker dot. Let's see if there was a selected. Give me 1 sec to look at. It's got a dot value. Okay, that returns, so you're going to see here the dot value returns a DateTime object. So I can just straight up convert that, and let's put that into DateTime. There we go. Yeah, I didn't, well, if I want to put it in a string, right? Yeah, you're right. So if I want to put it in a string, I could do a .to string, but the dot value returns a DateTime object, so we'll store it in a DateTime object, label result.text equals user date .to string. So now we allow the user to kind of select March 1st at that time. And it gets the current time. So of course on the lab, there's this approach where you're going to allow users to select dates, and you can work with a DateTime picker and then use the dot value. And just like any other control, there's all sorts of ways to extract the information out of this. Seems like the dot value is the most straightforward. Okay. So I just wanted to explore that a little bit with you guys. It'll get you what you need for the lab. Christian?
Is it a little bit more complicated to do this? To make it so that on screen it goes with the seconds and just keep going? It's not like on a button click. It's just like a permanent clock on the screen.
So your question is like to show like an updated clock on the screen? Yeah, so right now our event is a button click, and what you would need to do is just have a timer, right? So that timer would raise an event, so every second an event would fire based on the timer. And so if that's what your end goal is, to like, hey, here's just like a clock and I just want that clock to update, that's what you need to look into, just having a timer. All right, good question. All right, we'll stop there and we'll throw that out on YouTube to help out. Questions about this, guys? Or about the lab?
Will you go over how to build an enumeration class?
Yeah.
I had a question about this.
Yeah.
So whenever you input your own dating times, how can you have AM or PM? Is it like it automatically when it's AM?
Yeah, so your hours here, obviously 7 is 8 a.m., but this was based on, you know, if I did like a 20, that's going to go to PM,
Okay.
right? It's kind of like that military time. There we go. And that would be yesterday. So if I do yesterday to string, you can see that that's going to switch it over to PM. Okay. I'll stop this on the recording and then I'll talk about enumerations, which was Atticus's question.